Lisa had never been one to believe in the supernatural. She was a woman of facts and logic, a strict realist who worked as a nurse in a busy city hospital. But everything changed the night of the accident. It was supposed to be a normal drive home after a long shift, but in a split second, a truck swerved into her lane, and her car was crushed like a soda can. She remembered the sound of metal screeching, glass shattering, and then, nothing. When Lisa woke up in the hospital, she was surrounded by doctors and nurses, all speaking in hushed, urgent tones. She felt a heavy weight on her chest, a sensation that something or someone was pressing down on her. They told her she had been clinically dead for almost 4 minutes before they managed to bring her back. 4 minutes in which her heart had stopped, and she had supposedly been gone. But Lisa hadn't experienced the bright light or the tunnel that people often spoke of in near-death experiences. No, what she saw was something much darker, much more terrifying. She remembered a shadowy figure standing at the end of a long, dark corridor. It had no discernible face, but she could feel its eyes boring into her, pulling her toward it. She could still hear its rasping breath, the sound like nails on a chalkboard echoing in her mind. Even now, weeks later, she could feel its presence whenever she closed her eyes. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive, a miracle even, but Lisa didn't feel lucky. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the corridor and the figure waiting at the end of it. It was as if the thing was waiting for her to return. Her sleep was plagued with vivid nightmares of the shadowy figure reaching out for her, its hands like skeletal claws. She would wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding in her chest as if it was trying to escape. She tried to rationalize it, blaming the trauma, the brain's response to being deprived of oxygen, but deep down, she knew it was something more. Something that had touched her soul, had marked her. And no matter how much she tried to shake the feeling, she couldn't deny the truth. She had brought something back with her from the other side. Lisa's house had always been her sanctuary. A modest, 2-bedroom place in the suburbs, it was her escape from the chaos of the hospital. But after the accident, it felt different, cold, unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves were watching her. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound amplified. The creaking of the old floorboards under her feet sent shivers down her spine. She tried to brush it off as paranoia, a side effect of her near-death experience, but she knew better. Something had changed. It was late one night, just past midnight, when the first real encounter happened. Lisa had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that she was just being ridiculous. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows, but inside, everything was still, too still. She felt a chill run down her spine, and the hairs on her arms stood on end. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, coming from the corner of her bedroom. She sat up, straining to listen, but all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing, fast and shallow. She slowly turned her head toward the corner where the whisper had come from, but there was nothing there, just darkness. For a moment, she thought she saw something move, a flicker, like a shadow shifting against the wall. But when she blinked, it was gone. Lisa's heart was racing. She pulled the covers up to her chin, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But then she heard it again, this time clearer, like a voice rasping her name, Lisa. It was a low, guttural sound that sent a jolt of fear through her. She leapt out of bed, fumbling for the light switch, her hands shaking. The light flicked on, and the room was bathed in a soft, yellow glow. Everything looked normal, the same old furniture, the same pictures on the walls. But something was different. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like something was pressing down on her. She took a step toward the corner, her heart pounding in her chest, and that's when she saw it, a figure standing just outside the light, cloaked in darkness. It was tall and thin, with long, spindly arms that reached out as if trying to grasp her. Its face was hidden in shadow, but she could feel its eyes on her, cold and calculating. She gasped, stumbling backward, and in that moment, it moved. The shadow darted toward her, a blur of darkness that seemed to consume the light around it. Lisa screamed, throwing herself against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. But as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished. Lisa was left alone in the room, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body trembling. She sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face, and buried her head in her hands. She didn't know what to do, where to turn. All she knew was that the thing she had seen in her near-death experience was real, and it was here, in her home, and it wasn't going to leave her alone. For the next few days, Lisa tried to go about her life as normally as possible, but the encounter had shaken her to her core. She could feel the creature's presence, lurking just beyond her sight, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Every shadow, every creak of the house, sent her into a panic. She was barely eating, barely sleeping, consumed by the fear that it would come back. She even tried to tell a few friends about what she had seen, but their reactions were always the same, a mix of concern and disbelief. They suggested she see a therapist, maybe take some time off work, but no one took her seriously. They didn't understand what she was dealing with, couldn't comprehend the sheer terror that gripped her every waking moment. Lisa knew she was on her own. The creature was after her, and it wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. She had no choice but to face it, to find out why it was here, and what it wanted from her. She spent hours researching, scouring the internet for any clues, any hints as to what the creature could be. But no matter how much she searched, she couldn't find anything that matched what she had seen. The nights were the worst. The darkness seemed to close in around her, suffocating, and every noise made her jump. She would lie awake for hours, clutching the blankets tightly, her eyes darting around the room, waiting for the creature to appear. And every night, it did. Always in the shadows, just out of reach, but close enough for her to feel its presence, its hunger. Then, one night, as she lay in bed, she heard it again, that whisper, calling her name. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was many, overlapping, like a chorus of the damned. Lisa. Lisa, her blood ran cold. She sat up, staring into the darkness, and saw them, dozens of eyes, glowing faintly in the shadows, all fixed on her. The creature was not alone. Lisa could barely remember the last time she had slept through the night. The creature, or whatever it was, had taken that from her. Every night, the voices grew louder, the presence more oppressive. She would wake up to find herself drenched in sweat, her sheets tangled around her like a cocoon. The night seemed to stretch on forever, each second an eternity of dread, waiting for the moment the creature would strike again. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Lisa decided she needed a break from the suffocating atmosphere of her home. She called up her friend, Jenny, and asked if she could spend the night at her place. Jenny, always the understanding type, agreed without hesitation, even if she didn't fully grasp the gravity of Lisa's situation. Lisa packed an overnight bag and drove over to Jenny's, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. As she pulled into Jenny's driveway, she felt a brief moment of relief, a sense of safety she hadn't felt in weeks. But that feeling was fleeting. As she got out of the car, she saw it, just a flicker at the corner of her vision, a shadow moving across Jenny's lawn. Her heart skipped a beat, and she spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the darkened street and the faint glow of the streetlights. Shaking off the feeling, Lisa hurried inside, locking the door behind her. Jenny was there to greet her with a warm hug and a glass of wine. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jenny joked, but Lisa didn't laugh. She couldn't. The creature was everywhere, in every shadow, every dark corner. Even now, in the safety of Jenny's home, she could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting. They spent the evening talking, Jenny doing most of the talking while Lisa nodded along, her mind elsewhere. She tried to focus on the conversation, to lose herself in the comfort of her friend's presence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the night wore on, that feeling only grew stronger, a sense of impending doom settling over her like a shroud. When it was time to sleep, Lisa sat up on the couch, wrapping herself in a thick blanket, hoping for a few hours of peace. But as she lay there, staring up at the ceiling, she felt the familiar chill run down her spine. The room was dark, the only light coming from a small nightlight in the hallway. Shadows danced on the walls, shifting and twisting with every flicker of the light. Then, she heard it, the whisper, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing second. "Lisa. Lisa," her blood ran cold. She sat up, looking around the room, but there was no one there. The whisper turned into a low growl, a sound that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. She clutched the blanket tighter, her heart pounding in her chest, as the growl grew louder, filling the room. The shadows on the walls seemed to come alive, stretching and contorting into monstrous shapes. She could see them, figures moving just beyond the edge of the light, their eyes glowing with a faint, eerie light. They were here. The creature had followed her, and it had brought friends. She scrambled off the couch, backing away toward the hallway, her eyes wide with terror. Jenny appeared at the top of the stairs, groggy and confused. "Lisa? What's going on?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. But before Lisa could respond, one of the shadows lunged forward, a dark, clawed hand reaching out from the darkness. Lisa screamed, diving out of the way as the creature's hand swiped through the air, narrowly missing her. Jenny's eyes widened in shock, and she turned to run, but the shadows were faster. They moved like liquid, flowing up the stairs and surrounding her. Lisa watched in horror as Jenny was engulfed in darkness, her screams muffled by the inky blackness. She tried to move, to help, but she was frozen in place, her body refusing to obey. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The shadows retreated, slipping back into the darkness, leaving Lisa alone in the now eerily quiet house. Jenny was gone. Not a trace of her remained, as if she had been swallowed whole by the darkness. Lisa's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She had brought this upon her friend, dragged her into her nightmare, and now she was gone. Lisa didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She sat huddled in the corner of the room, staring at the spot where Jenny had been taken, her mind racing with guilt and fear. She knew she couldn't stay here. The creature would come back, and it wouldn't stop until it had taken her too. She needed to leave, to find somewhere it couldn't reach her. But where could she go? It was everywhere, always watching, always waiting. As dawn broke, she gathered her things and left, driving aimlessly through the empty streets, her mind a blur of panic and grief. She couldn't go home, couldn't risk bringing the creature back with her. She needed to find a place where it couldn't follow, but she knew, deep down, that no such place existed. It was a part of her now, a shadow that would haunt her forever. Lisa knew she couldn't keep running forever. The creature had proven that it would follow her anywhere. There was no escaping it. She needed to find a way to confront it, to understand why it was haunting her. She decided to return home, the one place she thought she might find some answers. As she walked through her front door, an unsettling calm settled over her. The air felt thicker, like she was wading through a dense fog. Her steps were heavy, every creak of the floorboards echoing through the quiet house. She made her way to the living room, where the dim light of the early morning barely penetrated the drawn curtains. The shadows seemed to dance along the walls, mocking her every move. Lisa knew she had to find a way to communicate with the creature. She needed to know what it wanted, why it was tormenting her. She had read about seances and summoning rituals during her frantic searches online, but they had always seemed too risky, too far-fetched. But now, with nowhere else to turn, she felt she had no choice. She gathered a few candles from her kitchen drawer and placed them in a circle on the floor of the living room. The flame of each candle flickered unsteadily, casting a soft, wavering light around the room. Lisa sat in the center of the circle, her heart pounding in her chest, her hands trembling as she held a piece of chalk. She began to draw a symbol she had seen in one of the many forums she had scoured, a symbol said to open a door between worlds, to invite the spirits to speak. As she completed the circle, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Lisa's breath came out in visible puffs of mist, and she shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "If you're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her racing heart, "show yourself. Tell me what you want." For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that presses down on you, that fills your ears with a high-pitched ringing. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, came a low, guttural growl. The shadows shifted, pulling together like ink in water, forming into the shape of the creature. It stood at the edge of the circle, just beyond the reach of the candlelight, its eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The creature didn't respond at first, it simply stared at her, its gaze piercing through her. Then, it stepped forward, into the circle of light, and Lisa could see it clearly for the first time. Its body was skeletal, covered in tattered, rotting flesh, its face a grotesque mask of decay. But it was its eyes that terrified her the most, empty, hollow pits that seemed to consume the light around them. "You should not have come back," it rasped, its voice a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from all directions at once. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She tried to hold her ground, but fear was quickly overtaking her resolve. "Why are you haunting me?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "What did I do to deserve this?" The creature tilted its head, a mocking gesture that sent a fresh wave of terror through her. "You cheated death," it replied, each word dripping with malice. "I was there to take you, but you slipped away. Now, I have come to finish what was started." Lisa felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was a different matter entirely. She had escaped death once, and now it was back to claim what it believed was rightfully its own. "Is there any way to stop this? To make you leave me alone?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. The creature remained silent for a moment, its hollow eyes studying her with an unsettling intensity. "There is only one way to appease the balance," it finally said, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You must return what was taken." Lisa's mind raced, trying to comprehend what it meant. "Return what?" she asked, frustration and fear mingling in her tone. My life? My soul? The creature nodded slowly, and Lisa's heart sank. She realized with a dawning horror that the only way to escape this torment was to give in, to let the creature take her back to the darkness it came from. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. There has to be another way, she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. I can't just die. The creature's expression remained unchanged, its gaze unwavering. There are always choices, it said cryptically. But every choice has a price. Decide wisely, for the balance must be restored. With that, the creature began to dissolve back into the shadows, its form dissipating like smoke in the wind. Lisa watched in stunned silence, her mind reeling from what she had just learned. She had been given a choice, but neither option seemed fair or just. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, a choice between her life and the unknown. Lisa knew one thing for sure: whatever choice she made, there would be no going back. The creature would not rest until the balance was restored, and she would have to find a way to make peace with that, or face the consequences. Lisa spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and dread. The creature's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the impossible choice she had to make. Every night, she sat in the circle of candles, hoping for answers, but the creature never returned. It was waiting, she realized, waiting for her to decide. The house had grown colder, darker, as if the creature's presence had tainted it, leaching all warmth and light. She rarely slept, barely ate, her mind consumed with fear and uncertainty. She had always fought so hard to stay alive, but now she had to consider the unthinkable, giving up her life to end this nightmare. One stormy night, as the wind howled outside and rain lashed against the windows, Lisa knew she couldn't wait any longer. The creature was growing stronger, its influence over her and her home becoming more oppressive by the day. She had to act, and she had to act now. She set up the circle of candles one last time, her hands shaking as she lit each wick. The flames flickered violently in the drafty room, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. Lisa took a deep breath, steadying herself, and began to speak. I'm ready, she said, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. I've made my decision. The room grew colder, and she could feel the creature's presence closing in around her, a suffocating darkness that pressed against her skin. The candles flickered, their flames shrinking to pinpoints of light. The shadows gathered in the corner, coalescing into the shape of the creature, its skeletal form towering over her. Have you chosen, then? It asked, its voice a harsh whisper that cut through the air like a knife. Lisa nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't want to die, she said, her voice trembling, but I can't keep living like this. If my life is the price to pay, then so be it. Just promise me it will end. Promise me you'll leave me in peace. The creature seemed to consider her words, its hollow eyes fixed on her. If that is your choice, it said slowly, then the balance will be restored. Lisa closed her eyes, bracing herself for the end. She felt a rush of cold air, the candles extinguishing one by one, plunging her into darkness. Her breath came in shallow gasps, fear gripping her heart like a vice. But then, something changed. The darkness didn't close in around her as she expected. Instead, she felt a warmth, a lightness spreading through her body. She opened her eyes to see a soft, golden glow emanating from her chest, pushing back the shadows. The creature recoiled, its form flickering, as if it was being pulled away. What is this? It snarled, its voice filled with anger and confusion. Lisa didn't know, but she could feel something inside her, a strength she didn't know she had. The light grew brighter, driving the creature back further. "You cannot take what is freely given," Lisa whispered, the realization dawning on her. "I choose to live, but not in fear. You have no power over me anymore." The creature screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration, as the light engulfed it, dissolving its form into nothingness. The room was filled with a blinding light, and Lisa closed her eyes, shielding herself from its intensity. When she opened them again, the room was still, the storm outside having passed. The candles were lit once more, their flames steady and bright. Lisa took a deep breath, the weight that had been pressing down on her chest for weeks finally lifting. The air was warm, the shadows no longer seemed threatening. She knew the creature was gone, banished back to whatever darkness it came from. She had faced her fear, made her choice, and now she was free. She stood up slowly, her legs weak but steady, and made her way to the front door. As she opened it, she felt the cool breeze of the night air on her face, fresh and invigorating. She stepped outside, looking up at the clear, star-filled sky. For the first time since the accident, she felt at peace. Lisa knew she still had a long road ahead of her. The experience had changed her, marked her in ways she couldn't yet understand. But she also knew she was stronger than she had ever been. She had faced death and come out the other side, not once, but twice. And now, she was ready to reclaim her life, to move forward without fear. She closed the door behind her and walked into the night, the shadows of her past finally behind her.